The next president needs to appoint someone with a proven conservative record, similar to Justice Scalia.
Republican presidential candidate Jeb Bush at last night's debate reacting to the death of Supreme Court Justice Scalia. And it's time now for our Sunday Group syndicated columnist George Will. David Gregory, former moderator of Meet the Press and author of the book, How's Your Faith? Washington Examiner columnist and conservative pollster Kirsten Soltis Anderson, and Fox News political analyst Juan Williams. Well, George, your thoughts about Antonin Scalia, his legacy, and the battle that seems to be shaping up over whether or not Barack Obama is going to be able to name his replacement?
Well, his originalism, his theory that the Constitution should be interpreted as the language was commonly understood at the time it was written and ratified, was an attempt by conservatives to react against what they took to be the somewhat freewheeling creation of non-constitutional rights by the Warren Court and others. His dissents, therefore, were often acerbic and written for the law students in the coming generation of judges, which complicated the process of getting to a majority. Justice Brennan once said the most important word in the Supreme Court lexicon is 5, and sometimes Mr. Scalia was indifferent to that because he was writing, so to speak, for the ages. His most important contribution, I think, was creating an alternative conservative infrastructure. Conservatives were shut out of the academy in many cases. I'm wearing the Federalist Society necktie. It's founded in 1982, shortly before he went on the court. 3 campuses, it's now on 200 campuses, 60,000 members, 10,000 law students right now. It's part of the complex and I think lasting Scalia legacy.
And what about this question of whether or not, obviously he can name a successor, but whether or not the Senate should act on it?
Well, the Senate, I think, should not, and certainly will not. The president would need all 46 Democratic senators plus 14 Republican senators, which is probably 14 more than he'll get. Beyond that.
That's just to break the filibuster.
That's correct. If, however, the Republicans had not taken the Senate in 2014, knowing Harry Reid's disdain for Senate precedents, Reid, I think, simply would have again broken the rules by changing the rules in the middle of the session and blocked filibusters of Supreme Court justices, and the president would have got away with it.
David, and by the way, it's good to have you here.
It's good to be here.
The future of the Supreme Court is always a big issue in presidential elections, but now we're talking about the current state of the Supreme Court playing out in the midst of a presidential campaign. How much of an issue do you expect that to be?
Oh, this is huge, and I agree with George's take on the politics of this in the Senate. But of course, if you're president of the United States, why wouldn't you do what your responsibility is, which is to appoint a successor to Scalia? And by the way, this is now ideological warfare of the highest order. And I don't mean that even pejoratively. I mean, this is what ideology and ideological warfare is really about, a contest of ideas in this country. And if Scalia stood for a subtler role of the Supreme Court in American society, and if he fought even for that in a losing way, it's all the more important because listen to Chief Justice Roberts say recently that he despairs about the fact that the Supreme Court is so highly charged politically right now. So if Obama nominates someone and they get blocked, the Democratic base is going to be highly energized in this campaign. If he gets someone through, the Republican base is going to be highly energized. No matter what happens, the court matters, and it's going to be a big issue on both sides.
Back in 2012, Justice Scalia sat down for an interview here on Fox News Sunday, and we got a real insight into his judicial philosophy and his personality.
Textualism means you're governed by the text. That's the only thing that is relevant to your decision, not whether the outcome is desirable, not whether legislative history says this or that, but the text of the statute. Originalism says that when you consult the text, you give it the meaning it had when it was adopted, not some later modern meaning. So if it was the Constitution written in the 18th century, you try to find what those words meant in the 18th century. Exactly. The best example being the death penalty. When the electric chair comes in, it's a new phenomenon. What did the framers think of the electric chair? Who knows? There wasn't any electric chair. But they did have the death penalty, and they did impose death by hanging. So what the originalists would say is, is the electric chair more cruel and unusual than hanging was? And of course it isn't, because it was adopted to be less cruel. And the same thing with lethal injection.
There is one Supreme Court decision, reading a lot of your writings and speeches over the years, that seems to distress you more than any other, and that is Roe versus Wade, the 1973 decision that says that women have a constitutional right to abortion. You say that it is a lie. And in fact, while generally willing, you say, to accept long-standing precedents, you say you will continue to press to overturn Roe.
It is, in my mind, the clearest example of being a non-textualist and a non-originalist. Nobody ever thought that the American people ever voted to prohibit limitations on abortion. I mean, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that.
What about the right to privacy that the court found in 1965?
There's no right to privacy in the Constitution, no generalized right to privacy.
Well, in the Griswold case, the court said there was.
Indeed it did, and that was wrong.
You wrote Sandra Day O'Connor's decision in a 1989 abortion case, quote, cannot be taken seriously. You called an opinion by Chief Justice Rehnquist in a 1988 case a short-sighted exercise in folly. In a 2007 dissent, here's what you wrote about Justice Breyer's opinion. The sheer applesauce of the statutory interpretation should be obvious. Are you cantankerous?
No, cantankerous. I express myself vividly. Those criticisms are criticisms of opinions, not of my colleague. I'm a good friend of Steve Breyer. I like him a lot, and of Sandra Day O'Connor, and of whoever else whose opinions I criticize.
And if they call one of your opinions sheer applesauce?
That's fine, so long as they can demonstrate that it's true.
You're 76 years old. Will you time your retirement so that a more conservative president can appoint a like-minded justice?
I would not like to be replaced by someone who immediately sets about undoing everything that I've tried to do for 25 years, 26 years. Sure. But, I mean, I shouldn't have to tell you that. Unless you think I'm a fool.
The wisdom and wit of Antonin Scalia. Kirsten, the conventional wisdom is, for all the talk every 4 years about the future of the court, that usually it doesn't actually move votes in a presidential election. But I want to pick up on what I was asking David. This time, if there's a debate, an angry debate going on in the Senate at the time, the president saying, here's my choice, Republican senators blocking that choice, could this time be different? Could it cut?
Only 20% of Americans say that they think that the Supreme Court is too conservative right now. I think the fact that there's a vacancy on the court is made even more important and sort of has sent people to their battle stations even faster, precisely because this is the seat that was held by Justice Scalia. The last two vacancies on the court were justices appointed by Republican presidents, but who had sided generally with the liberal side of the court. So President Obama nominating someone to fill those seats was not going to markedly change the balance of the court. Here, the idea of President Obama appointing a liberal justice to replace Antonin Scalia, someone that you can see why in that interview conservative law students across the country have idolized him, it would really upset the balance of the court, and I think that's what's going to make this a debate that conservatives are engaged and ready to have.
Yeah, but the flip side is if the president names somebody, as is his right under the Constitution, and the Senate blocks it, as is its right under the Constitution, you don't think liberals are going to be equally exercised?
I absolutely believe liberals will be equally exercised. But certainly the fact that you have 37% of Americans who think the court is already too liberal, in general, I think conservatives are excited about having this battle moving into November.
Juan, big picture, what do you make of this whole event? The passing of a legal giant, his legacy on the court, and the issue as to what this will play in the presidential campaign?
Well, you know, when I think of Justice Scalia, I think back to Ronald Reagan and Ed Meese as his Attorney General, wanting to undo the work of what they thought was a liberal activist court, which began obviously with Earl Warren in the 50s, but we're talking about issues like civil rights, we're talking about abortion rights, even you could say we're talking about gay rights. We're also talking about this confluence of rights emerging, and they saw it as coming from an activist court that no one elected, and they wanted to change it. And I think Scalia was the leader in that effort, as we saw in your interview, talking about textualism, originalism, going back to the words of the Founding Fathers. Now going forward in the court, and I think this is really interesting, you're going to have a 4-4 court. 4-4 court. So lots of things are not going to be decided here, and we've got key cases remaining: affirmative action, abortion, environmental regulation. Just in the past week or so, the court blocked President Obama's effort at environmental regulation. The other thing I'd say going forward is diversity. Huge issue here. President Obama, obviously, he wants this as a legacy issue, and he's already put 2 women on the court. The leading candidates right now, 2 more women. Diane Wood out of, I think she's out of this. What circuit, George, you remember? I don't. But also,
Ninth Circuit.
Ninth Circuit. And then Janet Napolitano, former governor of Arizona, HHS secretary. But also you could have the first.
DHS secretary.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
your Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah.
And then also you've got an Indian American for the first time, Sri Sriversian, and you potentially have the first Hispanic man, Ruben Castillo. So diversity is going to add to the kind of anger on the left if the Senate chooses to somehow say, oh, we are going to ignore this president.
This is going to be the kind of politically charged debate that Antonin Scalia would thoroughly have enjoyed.
love it.
Oh, yeah.
Panel, thank you. We have to take a break here. See you a little bit later in the program.